Are you going on a trip out west and considering visiting Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park? My name is Cheryl and my husband Matt is behind the camera, and we're the co-founders of We're in the Rockies. Our whole point is to help you have an amazing trip to the west. Our first tip is to visit both parks. I think a lot of times Grand Teton gets overshadowed by Yellowstone because, let's face it, Yellowstone is magnificent and it has so much to see, from geysers and wildlife and canyons and waterfalls. There is so much to see there, and it's so scenic and it's so big and it's on people's bucket list. And a lot of times people haven't even heard of Grand Teton. And Grand Teton is only about an hour below Yellowstone, but we always say about 2 because it's 2 hours from the heart of Yellowstone. But Grand Teton is completely different. I mean, Yellowstone has some mountains, but they're not these big towering peaks, but that's where you're going to see them, is at Grand Teton. They are just incredible. You really can't see another mountain range like it. We travel around the west all the time, and really I don't think there's mountains that compare to this, maybe in Banff, but they're just amazing mountains. And we hear from our customers often, and a lot of times we'll hear, I'm going to spend 8 days in Yellowstone. And we kind of think, that's a great plan, but did you know that maybe you could spend 4 days in Yellowstone, see the best of Yellowstone, and then travel down to Grand Teton where you can see some even more cool things. And so we think it's kind of worth it if you're planning like a longer trip. Instead of just spending all your time in one park, split time between the parks because they're different and they're both amazing in their own unique way.
Okay, and my name's Matt, the other half. And we are here right now in the town square of Jackson, Wyoming. We got those antler arches back there, those elk antler arches. So my next tip here is don't stay in one place to visit both parks. I've talked to so many people who are planning their trips out west here, and they're wanting to have like one home base to visit Yellowstone and Teton. It just really doesn't work. Some people will try to stay here in Jackson and go visit Yellowstone in a day. It's not going to work. It takes 2 hours just to get up to the bottom of Yellowstone. And then, I mean, there's not much you can do there. You would spend your entire day driving. Some people think they could stay at Flag Ranch, which is kind of located between the park, and it's a really cool place. It was funny yesterday because we were hiking and somebody saw us and recognized us from our channel and just really struck up a conversation. A fascinating fellow. And he was just so funny because he said, he was just confirming this very thing. He goes, yeah, you can't stay in one place to see both these parks. He goes, people think you can stay at Flag Ranch, but it's just too far away. And it is, it's just too far away to really see both parks. You spend just too much time driving. So our recommendation there is Flag Ranch is great if you want the resort experience, but it's not a great home base. So just plan on staying in at least 2 different places. We actually like staying in 2 different places in Yellowstone itself, and then moving down to Grand Teton and staying here. So 2 to 3 different places on your trip.
The next tip is that Yellowstone and Teton can actually be part of an even bigger Western road trip. I mean, those 2 are so close together that it's very easy to combine those 2 parks. But we've talked to several people and even done this ourselves. They called it the Black and Yellow Road back in the day, and that was when they would connect Yellowstone to the Black Hills. And the Black Hills is Mount Rushmore, Wind Caves, Custer, Crazy Horse. I mean, there are so many amazing things in the Black Hills, and oh my goodness, going on a trip like that where you're hitting Teton and Yellowstone and then the Black Hills is so much variety and so much fun. Our children love going to the Black Hills. Amazing variety and amazing scenery if you do that. Another idea that you can do if you're interested is you can go over to Glacier National Park. Oh man, Glacier is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. I feel like kind of a dork because I'm saying they're all amazing, but the truth is they are. It's like children, you don't have a favorite. They're different from each other, but oh my goodness. So Glacier is another option. So those are some road trip ideas.
Okay, now let's talk about airports here. So there are 3 main airports that people use to fly into Yellowstone and Grand Teton. So the first one is the Jackson Airport, which is actually located like right here within the park of Grand Teton. So it's just right here by Jackson. Another airport is Bozeman, Montana, which is about an hour and a half away from the north entrance of Yellowstone. That's a really common one. And then another one is Salt Lake City. So Salt Lake City, Utah is about 4 hours away from either Jackson or West Yellowstone. And you just kind of straight shot up I-15 to get there. And so a lot of people fly into there, I think because the flights are cheaper. Salt Lake City is a bigger airport. And so my advice here, a lot of people ask us, which airport should I fly into? And my common advice is just do whichever's cheapest. When you factor in your flight and the rental car cost, of course, just do whichever's cheapest. All of them offer great drives into the parks and just tons of stuff to do around here. So just go with whichever's cheapest and you'll have a great trip.
The next thing I want to talk to you about is driving times. Okay, we're talking about Yellowstone and Grand Teton. So Yellowstone is big. We often say that Yellowstone is as big as Delaware and Rhode Island combined. You're talking about a big area of land. And so just to even drive around the heart of Yellowstone, it's a loop, and we kind of call it an 8 because there is a little road in between that connects. But just to drive around that park is a 4 to 7 hour drive without any stops. We rarely drive that entire thing in one day. We like to split it up because it's just not fun to see Yellowstone from the seat of your car. It's nice to be able to get out and go do things. And Yellowstone is so accessible. Even if you aren't a big walker or hiker, there's so many like bonus waterfalls that you park, you get out, you walk to that are 5 minutes, and then you can get back in your car. But what I'm saying is that Yellowstone is so big that you're going to have to plan a lot of time just to drive around the loop. Grand Teton is very different from that. Grand Teton, the main area to go, is long and skinny. You can basically get from one end of the park to the other end in just 1 hour. And so Grand Teton is a lot more doable if you want to take a break in the middle of the day, hang out at your hotel. There's just some differences between those two parks on the time it takes to drive between them.
Okay, now let's talk about which order to visit the parks, because that's another question we get a lot is, should I go to Yellowstone first or Teton first, or how should I do it? So the order really doesn't matter unless it's on the shoulder seasons. If you're in the early spring, go to Grand Teton first and then go to Yellowstone. That's ideal. If you're in the late fall, you go to Yellowstone first, and then you come down to Grand Teton and Jackson. And that's because the visiting season for Grand Teton and Jackson is longer. Yellowstone's a higher elevation. It's colder. It gets hit by the winter earlier in the fall. In fact, the elk in Yellowstone, they migrate down here in the winter to the National Elk Refuge because it is lower ground and a longer season. So that's one consideration for the order of the parks. The other thing is you could actually, depending on the airport you're coming into, so if you're flying into Bozeman and you're gonna see both parks, you might wanna go Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Yellowstone, Bozeman. So, mix it up a little bit if you need to, but generally speaking, the order doesn't really matter all that much.
Both of these parks actually offer some great activities in the gateway towns. We always say Yellowstone is for sightseeing, Grand Teton is for playing. But when I say that, I want to make clear that there is plenty of beautiful things to see in Grand Teton. So don't think that it's just about partying it up in Grand Teton. But the Grand Teton's claim to fame is that this is a recreational park. People rock climb, they paddleboard, they raft, and they can do scenic rafting. Like they can either do scenic floats down the Snake River, or they can do white water in Jackson. And so there's some really great white water options. So a lot of water things you can do. And also the city of Jackson is a happening spot. I mean, there's great shopping, great eating, there's plays, there's rodeos, there's all sorts of fun things in this area. I mean, people want to come to Jackson. It's just famous for being a fun touristy town, and that is the truth. There's even shootouts in the street every night in the summer, except for Sundays. No shooting on Sundays. Okay, another thing is this is like a rock climbers park. People love to do rock climbing. And one thing that is also very cool is Teton Village. Teton Village offers some great gondola and tram rides up to the peaks of the mountains where you can see some amazing scenery. We actually did that yesterday, and you can actually view the Teton peaks from there. So Teton Village is another spot that people like to go and play. Now in Yellowstone, of course, there's all of that scenery you can see. There actually are a few fun things to do in West Yellowstone, but people mostly go to Yellowstone to sightsee. And so you are getting some recreation in Teton and some sightseeing in Yellowstone, and it's just that combination just makes for a really fun and memorable trip with a lot of variety.
Okay, now another question I get a lot is, should I do a tour? Like, this feels overwhelming to people because these are really big parks. It's a lot of driving. It's kind of hard to piece this stuff together. And so a lot of people say, should I just book a tour? And my take on that is, don't book a tour if you're just doing it because you're a little concerned about planning it out. Tours are great. We love tours. I've given tours, and tours offer a lot of benefits. But in this area here, it's so big that if you do a tour, you're gonna pay a lot of money and you're gonna spend a lot of time driving, like just a lot of time driving. I mean, I've seen several vehicles or vans down here in Jackson that are offering tours of Yellowstone in a day, and I already told you that's just a bad idea to just drive all the way up into Yellowstone and back. That's pretty much all you'll be doing is driving around, and you're gonna be paying a lot of money for it. So our take here is save your money for excursions and activities while you're here, like ride the tram to the top of Teton Village. That's awesome, you know. Do a river rafting tour, do a chuck wagon tour like we did the other night at Bar T5. We took a chuck wagon ride out into the woods and they sang country music to us and fed us dinner. Last night we went to the Jackson Hole Playhouse and had dinner there and watched an amazing play, Annie Get Your Gun. So save your money for some of the activities. That would be my advice there, and just do your homework on the rest. You can do this. You don't need a tour to see both of these parks. Okay, now time to talk about something super, super cool, something that you're probably coming here to see that you're super excited for, and that is the wildlife. Oh man, we've just had the best time this year. We've seen so many cool animals this year as we've traveled around these national parks. So there's a question that we get from people is which park is better for seeing wildlife, Yellowstone or Grand Teton? A lot of people assume Yellowstone because Yellowstone is famous for the wildlife, and Yellowstone has a lot more wildlife because it's a much bigger park. I mean, it's got like 5,000 bison. It's got, you know, about 1,000 bears, something like that. Grizzly bears, several. I mean, they don't even know how many black bears. There's a ton of black bears there. Several thousand elk as well. So Yellowstone, you would assume it's just the easy winner, but not so fast. So Grand Teton has really great wildlife, and what's great about it is Jackson Hole Valley is this flat valley with sagebrush that wildlife just love to roam in. Like this is, I mean, it's actually kind of like Lamar Valley up in Yellowstone, which is famous for having so much wildlife. The whole valley of Jackson floor is really big, and it's a little bit like Lamar Valley. You'll see antelope here, you'll see elk, deer, and then the very famous moose. I have never seen a moose in Yellowstone. I know they exist in Yellowstone, but I've never seen one, but we always see them here. Just the other day, we pulled in here. I was at Dornan's, and I was down by the river, and this bull moose started walking up right by me. I saw him walk behind the building, and I thought, uh-oh, where is he? And I started kind of tracking and making sure he wasn't coming around the corner. And I walked out and he was walking right at me. And I started backing up and trying to get, you know, behind the cabins and behind a tree and things like that. And he just kept coming right at me. He was probably just about 15 feet away, this huge bull moose. He was so fun to see. And so we have seen several wildlife here. One time we were here at an overlook and we saw this cute little black bear cub climbing up the top of this bush. It was like a tree, like a bush, and it was just like poking its head out of this thing. It was incredible. So we've seen bears here, moose, big elk. I mean, man, Grand Teton is a great place to see wildlife. So I'm gonna call this a tie on the wildlife. I guess if I had to give a nod, we'd go with Yellowstone, because the thing about Yellowstone is you're gonna run into bison literally on the road. Every time you visit, you're gonna be running into bison. So there's kind of a guaranteed thing there. But Grand Teton is really not far behind. They're both great. Don't overlook Grand Teton, it's awesome. So if you're visiting both parks, we have trip planners for you that you can watch that'll walk you through both parks, both for Yellowstone and for Grand Teton. So check those out next. Thank you for watching, and until next time, go west, young traveler.